Meteorologist Casey Cloud breaking in right now here on this Sunday night. This is a special report as we have multiple weather hazards. I know not impacting our area directly with anything hazardous right now in terms of warnings here. We have a special marine warning, but not in terms of severe thunderstorm, tornado warnings, flash flood warnings locally, but just the sum of everything else going on here in the meteorology really requires me to jump in right now. There is a lot happening to our south, some to our west, and way to the south there's a Cat 4 hurricane barreling toward Jamaica. We need to start off with Florida right now because we have to have a tornado warning now in Brevard County until 10:30 here. Some radar indicated rotation right along the Space Coast. I know there is a damage and wind risk in here, and we have this urgent tornado warning under the rotation right now. Looks a little bit broader on other source here that I'll pull up. This got issued here at about, let's see, 9:59, it's about 11 minutes ago, and this goes till 10:30, including areas that are on Cocoa, the Sharps area, Merritt Island there, Port St. John. This is in Brevard County, not our covered area, but we have so many other things to jump in for. And this is the first one down to the south of the tornado warning. We had a bunch to the west earlier, Pensacola West, and that could reemerge in the night and impact parts of our western counties. I know it's kind of confusing. There's a lot going on. We have high pressure to the north. We have the hurricane, the low pressure way to the south, and we have a front involved here too, plus some other areas here in the meteorology that's kind of, acting as triggers here. So we have to be very mindful here. There's some weird stuff going on right now with the overall patterns. We have a tornado warning though in toward parts of Brevard County along the Space Coast. Not exactly the reason I was coming on actually. This popped up as I was getting everything ready. You see how it's some green and red here coming on in from the west, moving off toward the east here. We had that kind of there toward an area there more over water, and now it's starting to weaken. So they may drop that tornado warning pretty soon, but we'll have to watch it. We've had this stuff kind of that, odd accent it's been for a while, and it's something to monitor, obviously, as we're looking down there toward the Space Coast. Again, a tornado warning involved until 10:30. That looks quite a bit weaker right now, moving off toward the west at 10 miles an hour. So again, we have a lot going on though. The reason I came on more than anything is actually something just south of our covered area. And I know the radar sometimes kind of distort it, but we have had a flash flood emergency issued here just in the last 15 minutes or so for parts of Lake County. It's outside of our covered area, just barely, but Eustis and Mount Dora. I know it's kind of weird here in that you see Mount Dora. Some of it's slacking off a bit right now, but as I back it up and go forward, but it kind of varies depending on where you are. I know back it up, you see Eustis kind of slacking off some, but Mount Dora, they're still kind of in the thick of this. And the reason we have the emergency issue, which is not something the Melbourne office does very often. I mean, I have to try to remember the last time they issued one. It may be during one of the hurricanes we've had. I'll have to look back here. It's been a while since they've issued a flash flood emergency down there in their area, but maybe Hurricane Milton last year. I'm not sure. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here in the overall picture, again, it's something they don't do very often here with all of this. But there's been some, many things here in the meteorology, and it kind of quieted down. But we've had a situation here where they said in the statement between 15 and 18 inches of rain have fallen, with another 3 inches here possible. Some areas, in theory, could get more because the models are not handling this well at all. They were showing some rain and a little bit of flash flood risk, but nothing like this here toward Lake County. This is taking the escalation a turn here, folks. A particularly dangerous situation. You see car around now. The life-threatening flash flooding. This isn't in our covered area quite. It's very close. Our area really hadn't, except I'll see in a few spots here in a moment, they haven't met flash flood criteria, but it's something that down there we have life-threatening flash flooding of low water crossings, small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses there. We're talking about Eustis, over toward Tavares there, Mount Dora, Sorrento, Umatilla, Lake Eustis, and Lake Dora. Again, the indication is maybe 18 inches of rain, a foot and a half in terms of the rainfall may have, accumulated there as we look, and this is showing some of these areas over a foot as I'm, with my mouse, you can't see the numbers, but I'm seeing 12, 13, 14 on the radar, and they're saying maybe 18 inches of rain has fallen, with additional inches to come here. Some of these areas still getting very heavy rainfall here in Lake County. This is just our areas right here, and as I look, I'll back, up here and look at the storm total. I mean, our area here, some of our areas are far southeastern Marion County viewers, maybe 2, 3 inches, but nothing like over a foot. I mean, the grade's over 5 inches, the color table, and this is, it's not expecting this much rain, so it just kind of goes off the color table here, above it. I did another one I can sell in a different source. But we'll go to the Jackson radar because there has been some areas of heavy rain up and toward our covered area. We start to see now some of these areas getting 4 inches into towards St. John's. I mean, we need to rain in some of these spots. It's getting pretty close to maybe ended up getting a flash flood warning. We had some flood advisories, but not enough for a warning, not enough for all the radio, announcement there in terms of it actually being, the EAS there being triggered or anything like that. But as we're looking here, we also have in Columbia County some areas over 4, upward of 5 inches there, but that's a pretty rural area up there. And Lake City proper, only about a quarter of an inch. So kind of an odd hidden miss situation. It is canceled a severe thunderstorm warning for Brevard, and a tornado warning. Those are both gone now because of the rotation has weakened down that way. That's good news, but the flooding threat is not good news. There's still a considerable flash flood warning down there. Let me check some of my indicators here as we're kind of checking things. I want to see if there's no more upgrades to emergency there yet, but we're just kind of trying to check things here live for you. You see all this rainfall there down south, but then up in areas in Brevard, as I move the map up here, you can see Rockledge and Titusville. Some of these areas have had some life-threatening flash flooding, not enough to call it catastrophic. That's what they're calling it now, the Weather Service in Melbourne, folks. Catastrophic flooding going on potentially around Mount Dora there in Lake County. Maybe over 1.5 feet has fallen here. It's absolutely catastrophic according to what the Weather Service is saying. I mean, it's a Sunday. Honestly, I haven't seen a whole bunch of reports, but when you get that much rain, you have a problem. So we have to take this very seriously here, folks. I mean, this is not something that was anticipated, at all in terms of, this amount of rain. I mean, the forecast coming in here, maybe you get 4 inches in a localized area, not 18 inches here. This is something that's really, out of the bound here of the forecast. As we're looking at things, they did issue a flood watch earlier on down there. That's not our covered area, but the flood watch, let me see the information on that, because again, it's not our covered area, but yeah, they issued that, in terms of the update there at 8:34, and they're just talking about the rain continues there. They were saying earlier on here that maybe 4 to 5 inches plus possible, but now we're talking about 18 inches of rain there toward Mount Dora area potentially, according to Weather Service. We're going to try to pull up some traffic cameras in the area there, see if we can see maybe where some of the roads are closed. We're going to go ahead and pull up State Road 46 there. US 441 is still open, but it doesn't look all that great out there. I mean, the road's not covered there, but some of the low-lying roads I'm sure are. So let's go ahead and pull this up on the traffic camera right now. I get a catastrophic flood emergency there in toward Lake County, the south of our covered area. Not really related to Melissa there. It's kind of complicated. It's not directly, that's for sure, but the pressure pattern, high pressure to the north, low to the south. Plus we have the front here, we have some other pressures involved here that, areas of low pressure that are involved here that are kind of playing a role with all this. So it's kind of a tricky forecast. And, it's not great looking around Mount Dora, but, some areas are definitely worse. This is on the main highway there, 441. But, and you see like a caution sign up. I'm sure if people trying to exit off, it's probably not, a great situation here on those low-lying roads. But we can't see. You got to wonder. I mean, I was getting indications here earlier. There was concern in Brevard. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some water rescues ongoing right now in Lake and/or Brevard counties because of this catastrophic flooding in Lake and considerable life-threatening flooding in Brevard counties. Again, this was not really expected. It took an escalation. There's a little bit of a flash flood chance, but nothing like this was in the forecast here. A turn for the worst in towards Central Florida. Localized areas, mind you. Orlando, not so much. You see Central Florida, you get concerned about Orlando or Kissimmee or St. Cloud. They haven't really got that much rain there, as I'll say here in just a moment, overall. But this is one traffic camera. I'm going to check some more information. It's a localized event here that's very significant now. Getting that emergency tag there from the Weather Service in Melbourne. They don't just hand that out. You even see some rotation here north of Apopka now. Some rotation there. It looks like to the northwest of Ocoee. We already had the tornado warning over Brevard. Some of this is going to try to work its way in our area. That's what the models are showing. But it was not showing all this rain. It was showing a lot less precip than what we're seeing there. So you never know. I think we're getting some amplification going on here in the pattern and just training. It's not a good thing here as we're looking down towards Central Florida. But yeah, let's see your rainfall totals like you were. You see me saying Central Florida. Oh no, this is Orlando or Disney World. Not so much. I mean, Orlando here, storm total less than an inch. Maybe the yellow area about an inch. Some of these areas need rain. Kissimmee there, not much at all. St. Cloud, only about a quarter of an inch. But again, as you get into Lake County there, Eustis, Mount Dora, Sereno, some of these areas getting well over a foot of precip here. Some areas getting, according to the Weather Service now, their statement's kind of shocking. I mean, it's going higher than what my radar signature are estimating. That's why we said we got to jump in with this, even though it's not our area. It's just south here, this yellow here. Over 8 inches is the brightest yellow on this colored table, but the Weather Service is now saying 18 inches of rain have fallen in some areas. 18 inches here just south of our area today, this since the PM hours began. This is very serious stuff here, folks. I mean, we worry about Jamaica, and some of us are going to get 40 probably down there, which is, in those areas it's more widespread, mountains. It's going to be way worse even than what this is, but this is a lot more localized, but this is not far from our area. I mean, our covered area, we had a Central Florida tornadoes in 07, and it's, really just south of our area in general. And you see only 6 miles away from our covered area is where we have the bullseye here, this heavy rain. Again, our covered area, ends right here. And we've talked about maybe an inch or so of rain. But again, this is a very serious situation that was not really, I mean, there was, the possibility of some flash flooding, but to get it up to the highest level of warning is a surprise. This is our area, but we're covering down there because we're just so concerned, down there for folks in Lake County. Get a catastrophic emergency is what the Weather Service in Melbourne calling it. I don't want to overhype this. We aren't just jumping in to jump in here. I, was retweeting stuff earlier, really hoping, the rain would slack off enough where it didn't get to this. But unfortunately, the Weather Service is now saying it has gotten to that point where we have a catastrophic situation, a flash flood emergency. The threat level in terms of the damage potential is catastrophic. Saying here in this, as I'm reading some of the details, move to higher ground now. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. Do not attempt to travel here in terms of this unless you are fleeing an area. As I zoom back into you see Mount Dora here. Do not attempt to travel unless you are fleeing an area subject to flooding or under an evacuation order. Turn around, don't drown when encountering flooded roads. Most flood deaths here occur in vehicles. Stay off the roadways in the area. Move to higher ground now. Act quickly to protect your life. This is from the Weather Service statement in Melbourne. Be especially cautious at night when it's hard to recognize the dangers of flooding. And this is just not what you want to hear, folks. Around Mount Dora and around Eustis here. Mount Dora is still getting the heavy downpours though at this moment. And we may end up getting more in here. This is just not a good situation here, folks. The erratic movement of some of this action here on the Doppler technology. So this is not what you want to see. We also do have a tornado threat and a wind threat is what I got up right now. Let me put the tornado threat. It's actually a little further east. So a little bit of Franklin County in our covered area in Liberty. I know it's weird because you're saying, well, wait a minute. We're going from our southern areas in North Central Florida and south of that over to our Big Bend counties. But no, we have a tornado threat over here later tonight. Sumatra, Creoles, Apalachicola. So we have to break in for tornado warnings out there. We haven't had any tornado warning storms in a while. And we're always on for any within our covered area. So it's, a weird situation as we're looking. But there's our covered area. As we go ahead, you don't see anything right now, but some of these could become tornado warned here out toward the Pensacola area. Again, we have some radar indicated rotation. We have some supercell composite values here. And we even have some significant tornado parameters out there. We have some of this in Central Florida, but generally not as much here. It's, again, a complicated situation here for sure. as we're looking and as we're tracking things with the overall meteorology. There's just a lot you can talk about with this. This is not something that was well forecasted, to be quite honest, down there. You know, it's not our covered area, sure, but you know, it's kind of alarming because things in Central Florida normally are not, you know, just kind of off the rails here per se in terms of the localized. You can get maybe a foot occasionally, but now we're talking about 18 plus, maybe approaching. Some areas could end up, in theory, if you know, if things could go on the way they're going, some areas could end up with 2 feet of rain here in Lake County. Again, this is some model guidance here to HiRes from a little while ago. Let me just, I know, again, I don't think the model they're going to be handling this all that well, but it still shows some moisture for a while before it pulls out there. This shows that, you know, 5 a.m. maybe some heavier downpours in Glenn County in Georgia. And then you see to the west, we have maybe a tornado threat there, you know, along the coast there, Fort Walton Beach, give or take. It's a pretty low one, but we had a pretty low threat this morning out there toward southern Mississippi, and we had a particularly dangerous situation, tornado warning crop up on us. So this is kind of approaching here, Apalachicola, 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central. You can see here, this is 8 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Eastern. So maybe some tornado warnings around sunrise in there. You know, you see Apalachicola, give or take there. And then you see that kind of moving off because it's where the instability is high, so it's going to be more confined. And then we'll have to see how much of this makes it over. It may not. I mean, it may kind of break up more with this, you know, line here. But you just never know. Some of this stuff could kind of just hang out here and flood, you know, some of our areas there on the first coast off toward the east as we progress it. So it's a complicated pattern. I don't know if I want to trust the models, high-res models here all that much. I mean, they missed this. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm going to look back at things here on the system. I'm just going to pull up HRRR here and look back here, even just some of the more recent runs. Goodness gracious, they missed this. I mean, I was looking at it earlier on, but I was just going to check to make sure, you know, even the more recent runs, this is some of the worst model performance I think I've seen in a while here, folks. I mean, goodness, this is awful. As we're looking here, I mean, the forecast model, HiRes, I was hoping at least a few inches on here, you know, once it started to get a handle. I mean, literally it was showing not more than 1.5 inches, really, for any of these areas down there, you know, in Central Florida. And instead, we're talking about 18 inches. This is awful in terms of these forecast models here. Some of this, it just makes you, you know, it makes you a little concerned here that they can be this. I mean, you don't see that very often. You know, you just got to roll with it out here in the meteorology world. Sometimes things, you know, here in meteorology can throw you a curveball. But again, this is not what you want to see here. Again, some areas, you know, maybe getting upward of 18 inches there in the ward part of Lake County tonight in Central Florida. Again, not a good situation at all. That's according to Weather Service. They're calling this a catastrophic situation with the damage threat and an emergency situation. So, not what you want to deal with here. Let me go ahead and pull up another traffic camera. I mean, this is really localized when Orlando is saying it hadn't hardly rained here, so what is the deal? But here's another traffic camera. It's more, you know, higher ground-ish compared to what you're going to see in the low-lying areas here for sure. I'm sure those are flooding pretty badly at this point based on all this rain. You see some ponding here on US 441 in the main highway there in Lake County right now on this live Florida 511 traffic camera view. So that's kind of the storyline there right now as we're looking and as we're tracking things. I'm trying to give you the very latest, obviously, on what's going on here. Again, this is the higher, you know, ground per se, but I mean, it's kind of shocking to see them go that high on the rainfall because the radar is showing over a foot. See all these lightning strikes here. Hopefully there's no power flashes in there, but you know, again, this is just south of the covered area. In theory, some of this could work its way north. I don't know if they'll be, you know, as well put together once they get in our covered area, but we shall see. Again, like I said, the models have been really not handling this good at all. As you can see there around Brevard County, this heavy rain still. Also have flash flood warnings down there toward Palm Beach County and Broward County as well. You have around Broward. Okay, they're now calling this life-threatening in Broward County now. They haven't got the amount of rain, areas further north, and they're also saying Palm Beach County is a life-threatening situation. So they haven't gotten the amount of rain here as the areas to the north. But Boca Raton there, maybe 5 to 7 inches of rain in the last 2 hours, maybe not 18 inches yet, but it's just training on in there. And Boca Raton there, in parts of Palm Beach County, again, they're saying the Weather Service in Miami saying at 10:05, train weather spotters reported, thunderstorms producing heavy rain and significant flooding on Federal Highway in Boca Raton. Between 5 and 7 inches of rain have fallen. Additional rainfall amounts of 1 to 2 inches are possible. Train weather spotters concerned there, about this area. And this warning does include Boca Raton, Deerfield Beach, Lighthouse Point, Highland Beach, Hillsborough Beach, Boca Del Mar, and the FAU Florida Atlantic South Campus. And then as I go ahead and go down to the south, we have this life-threatening warning now as we get, that was Palm Beach. Now in Broward County, we're talking about between 4 and 6 inches of rain have fallen, and we're talking about 1 to 3 additional possible. Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Deerfield Beach, Lighthouse Point, Hillsborough Beach, again, as we continue to give you guys the very latest on all this here. This is not what you want to see, obviously. Boca Del Mar, Pompano Beach Airport, North Pompano Beach, and Terramore there. So, again, this is some bad stuff happening in Florida. That was not all that anticipated at all. I mean, the models have completely, I don't want to go too much more into it here, but they have, and this is why, it's in our area here, but I got to wonder our area if some of this is going to start to intensify here as we have some boundary movement here. We'll have to see, this is some bad model performance. I know stuff can still out like this, but, it's one thing to have it on the coast. This can happen sometimes, and more than what you would want, and not, not that often to be, a foot, but to now be talking about maybe 18 inches in an inland area like Lake County is very concerning. I know, unfortunately here, and I don't know why I got the name Lake County, but unfortunately, it's sadly, living up to that name a little bit. And you hate to say that, but that's just how it is going here right now in towards Central Florida as we're looking and as we're tracking things. Let me see how I got that name real quick here. It's found in 1800s. County seat is Tavares there. Apparently because there's a lot of lakes there, supposedly is how it got its name. I mean, hopefully that'll help with flooding, but it's an emergency. This is a catastrophic flash flood warning. Again, flash flood emergency from the Melbourne office here. You see some of it's not really in the whole box, but it's good. But when I'm outdoors, they're not really slacking off all that much here. They go to the other mode. They go the last hour here, I'm outdoor, and just to the east, point east towards Sorrento. 3-4 inches in the last hour there. Let's get down, stay here. We're going to go to Palm Beach and that area here. On that, view, it's not, so let me clarify things real quick. There's Fort Lauderdale. Here is West Palm. West Palm, you've only got about 1/10 of an inch here. You're wondering what's going on. Why is he even talking about us? Well, it's okay right there, but not in Boca Raton. Some of these areas here have picked up significant amounts of rain. Storm total, we're talking about, here in the last, several hours, quite a bit. West Palm, you have picked up a couple inches, sure, in storm total, but this down here is 8 inches according to the radar estimates down here. Deerfield Beach, and some of this just in the last couple hours. Lighthouse Point, Pompano Beach. Again, this is just all coming in on everybody here, and not a good situation. So again, not our area, but we have to be, this is turning into a national story now. I mean, in terms of a worldwide story, I did, have this in the description, so I need to jump over. I know it's kind of, we have all this stuff happening in Florida right now and the like, but we do have the international global story going on down south. So I'm going to switch sources here. We have this catastrophic weather emergency going on with Melissa, Hurricane Melissa down there. I know It's a weird pattern, as I've alluded to. Sometimes when you have, stuff this powerful in the basin, weird things can happen in other places too. But you can see here Jamaica. You can see Jamaica here. It's headed in that direction. This has that it's almost like a look of something you maybe would see in another basin, an annular type hurricane. That's how powerful it is. I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers just keep going up here in the next updates. Have they sent out the 11 o'clock yet? I'm gonna check here. They have not. The Hurricane Center, but 145 max sustained with higher gusts. Is moving west, but now it's gonna move toward Jamaica. Now some of the models have shifted a little west here, with some of this, and if so, it's gonna be more, looping around. That might end up being more of a rainmaker, and storm surge could be even worse. Though some of the winds in Kingston and Jamaica may not be as bad, but it might be a little worse, or even say a little. It's gonna be bad for everybody in Jamaica. Some of it's just a disaster. I mean, an absolute disaster here. But it could, it's going to change which areas have this total devastation, some with the wind and rain combination. But it was, slated to maybe make landfall further over where I put this red marker here. Take that off for a second so you can see. But instead now I'm making landfall further over here, which, that's not going to help with rain or surge issues with that coming in the flow. But it may help with the wind being a little lower in Kingston, where you don't have just the catastrophic winds there, but it's going to be worse in Montego Bay now, where I know there's been some basketball tournaments over the years for, U.S. people watching to kind of give you perspective and all that there. So, but that's not what, right now this is just about survival for people in Jamaica. You need to move, as inland as possible here. You need to be in a higher ground area, but you got to be mindful. There could be mudslides, landslides, because we have feet of rainfall expected, multiple feet here. This is going to be a disaster for Jamaica. This is going to be a humanitarian crisis. I mean, I'm certain of it pretty much here. There's no way this is just going to be broken up here. This is an absolute disaster, a global tragedy here. We're going to be talking about so many people's lives changed forever. It's about survival right now, as we talk about in Florida sometimes with storms, and hopefully this, will, ring true down there. But, the mantra is we can rebuild your home, but you can't, rebuild your life. So that's kind of the storyline with this. It's about survival here. If you're in Jamaica, it's about survival. This is going to be a disaster. You just got to survive. There has been some warning here for these folks, but some areas there's just not a lot you can do. I mean, the infrastructure may not, be in play there for everybody, with the mountains and the like. This is just going to be a disaster for Jamaica. Total devastation, worse than Hurricane Gilbert in '88. This is very bad news here. This is worse, than all the hurricanes pretty much they've ever had, in living memory here for Jamaica. It's not headed toward Florida. It's going to head toward Guantanamo Bay and Cuba, but then, veer out to the east. Well, I don't think at this point it's going to hit the northeast either, but we're just concerned about Jamaica here. This is going to be a disaster for Jamaica here. We're talking about wind gusts, 150 miles an hour at points. Surge coming in on Kingston and some of the areas on the south side of Jamaica. And then the flooding rain. Some of these areas could have 40 inches here. And some of these mountainous areas, there's going to be landslides, mudslides, total devastation. It's going to be tragic. You got to, rush preparation, and those preps to completion here. This is just a very bad story here for Jamaica. It doesn't matter if it weakens some. This is going to be Jamaica's, worst case scenario pretty much. There's just not much of it, that's going to save them here at this point in terms of the meteorology. You just got to take every preparation here. Any Americans there, if there's some way to still get out, on an airplane, and you should go ahead and do it. But, I mean, time, that window depends on airports and the like is, a situation where this, as we look, it's a slow mover, but the worst of it's going to be there Tuesday, but some of these outer fringes are, moving on in pretty quick here. I mean, some of those are already in there to some degree. You don't have radar on here, but water vapor, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse there. And it's not like, you think of Michael in Panama City, okay? And those winds, think of the similar type of winds, but over a much longer period of time, a much more rain, similar storm surge, but it's not going to weaken because you have all the ocean, acts in there around, and the hot water temperatures are going to keep supporting this. I mean, there are mountains that can just erupt at some, but depending on where it tracks, it's just going to be, we're going to have different factors here that can really localize the rain totals. I mean, some areas could get over 40 even inches of rain. We're talking about multiple feet of rain there down in toward Jamaica, areas that just can't handle this. I mean, Houston couldn't handle Harvey getting that much rain, and this area here, I mean, it's a situation where it's going to be very hard, I think impossible, for some of these areas to handle this kind of rain. This is going to be a global tragedy, you would think here. You think about earthquakes in like countries here, over the decades, like Haiti and the like. You think about Japan and the tsunami situation in 2011. You're talking about that type of global tragedy. You think about it, probably won't get to the number we had with the Indonesian situation with the earthquake, tsunami in 2004. Those type of numbers, I mean, it'd be hard to reach those, but we do have millions of people over in Jamaica. Talking about the death toll, it's not going to get that high, I can't imagine, because we were talking about just, almost 250,000 fatalities from the Indonesian tsunami there in 2004, around Christmas there. But we're still talking about, at least there's time to prepare on like a tsunami. So, it's just about, it's about, protecting your life here. If you know anybody in Jamaica, this is a monster hurricane here. An awful tragedy. It's headed toward Jamaica. Things are going to get worse and worse. Some of these flooding rains in toward Haiti, Dominican Republic, but, in Cuba as well. Guantanamo Bay is going to have some issues, I would think, here with this. It's going to be weakening some. But still, it's going to be pretty powerful as it moves across. Again, you just see that awful look here with this hurricane down that way. Just an awful set of circumstances headed for Jamaica. It's about somehow, getting into the places where you're not as susceptible to mudslides there and landslides. You're in a higher level though, but you're protected from the wind. It's going to be hard. You want to be as inland as possible too, but not in a low line area. There's a lot of, caveats here which make it very difficult. We just got the update, so let me see what they said here. You saw that update on our screen. Let me see what our numbers are here. I know, sometimes our system reads these a little different, but that's showing a Cat 5 coming in on them directly with the forecast. Let me see. I don't know if it's quite coming in our system on the actual details. The track changed though, so that updated. Let's see here. Not quite updating on the Hurricane Center site yet. I haven't had to do this in a while. We're tracking, live here with the tracks, with the information coming in fluid as it comes out. Again, trying to give you the latest here. Let me just see what we have. Just trying to get the updates here. Okay, well, I'm still waiting on that. While we're waiting on that, let's get back to our area here. You see our area, we don't have any, warnings. It's great, but it's south of the area. We have that flash flood emergency here, Fort Lake County. We've got an update. At 10:36 p.m., local law enforcement reported thunderstorms producing heavy rainfall across the warned area between 15 and 18 inches of rain. Yes, really, 15 and 18 inches of rain apparently have fallen near Eustis to Mount Dora. Flooding of homes and numerous roadways in the area have now been reported. Additional amounts of 1 to 2 inches possible. Flash flooding already occurring throughout the roadways in this area. Again, a catastrophic emergency. Eustis and Mount Dora there, as we're looking. Eustis, Tavares there, Mount Dora, Sorrento, Umatilla, Lake Eustis, and Lake Dora. Again, a catastrophic flash flood threat there, a flash flood emergency as we're looking there, and that's the current radar. As we go ahead, we have this pattern here with the winds, and that's nor'easter type conditions. We do have, I see we don't have warnings here. Well, let me just talk about some of the coastal alerts we do have. We have that rip current risk around, of course. And we do have the, let's double check some stuff here. We have flood advisory for to St. John's, so small craft advisors in play and the like. So you got to be mindful of that. Let's get back to the south here on this special report. Okay, so we got the latest in on this hurricane, on this violent hurricane, Melissa. Again, you know, the worst of the worst here, headed toward Jamaica. Just an awful set of circumstances. We're talking here, as I put the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale up. You see the damage in the background. That's from Tyndall Air Force Base after Michael. They had these type of winds we're expecting in Jamaica. You know, parts of Jamaica. Of course, the winds aren't like the rain, where the winds will be a little more confined at least. But they'll be, you know, hanging around. They'll be, you know, just shredding things. They'll be, for part of Jamaica that does get the winds, they'll be, you know, longer lasting because of the slow movement. There'll be a lot more rain here. And, you know, and it's just, it's not going to be a good situation. Some of these areas in Jamaica probably won't ever recover, as Melissa is likely to cause life-threatening and catastrophic flash flooding and landslides in portions of Jamaica and southern Hispaniola. Hurricane conditions expected to begin by late tomorrow in Jamaica here, folks. Okay, so 145 miles an hour max sustained in the latest update. Pressure, minimum central pressure, 933 millibars. Western movement at 5 right now, but it's going to make that turn right in toward Jamaica here. Just an awful situation for Jamaica. Even hurricane warnings toward Guantanamo there in Cuba. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here. And just checking here the numbers and the discussion. Okay, they're saying a 36 hours, 160 miles per hour. So that is the 8 a.m. Eastern Tuesday mark. And the 8 a.m. Tuesday mark is right here. So that is going to be, sometimes the system is reached into categories weird, but it's showing a Cat 5 landfall on Jamaica now. The official forecast update here, the latest one with gusts upward of 170 knots. A possibility. So we're talking about winds there in that part of Jamaica, maybe upward, according to the forecast from the Hurricane Center, gusts to 195 miles an hour. Now, you know, you could have tornadoes east of this, especially, you know, those winds actually probably wouldn't be, you know, in those areas, as you get all the way to the east side of Jamaica there, wouldn't be as strong as that. We're talking about, you know, just extreme tornado-like winds coming through there as we're looking there in toward Jamaica. Again, just awful, awful devastation anticipated. As I'm looking at some geography here, it's looking like right now, based on the track, it's going to be making landfall, it would seem, around Treasure Beach, maybe a little bit further up from that. So they would be getting some of the worst surge. Some of the topography can help areas further east. You know, this is a, you know, not part of the U.S. here. So it's not, it's an area I'm familiar with here for sure. But it's something, you know, where the English language there is the official language here, as I'm looking at things, and they're going to need a lot of help here as we look ahead in toward the timeline. Again, Treasure Beach there, all that surge coming in, but other areas they still have it, and this is going to be a violent hurricane here, folks. With the flood threat, I mean, you know, all this purple, I mean, it's hard to say when you don't have radar, because sometimes it's in the upper levels don't always translate, but let's just see, have the landfall. Let's see, it's the same size. I mean, I accept it when radii, I guess it could pull up. Sometimes it gets too crowded. I'm sure it probably will. Yeah, it's really getting crowded. But this is just encompassing, you know, most of that island nation here, really, as we're looking and as we're tracking things. As we're trying to give you guys the very latest here. You know, you see all this area of purple with the worst winds. Maybe Kingston doesn't get as bad of winds. And then, you know, but the flooding, you know, it's going to be all over the place there, and surge is going to be bad on that side. You know, talking about 110 miles across. So let's just say, let me do some more measurements here. So 70 miles to the east with the purple here. So that's the deepest tropical moisture. So 70 miles to the east of that with the deepest tropical moisture. I mean, you know, some of these purples will weaken some when they're over land, but that gets you almost across the island. And in the western side, it's like, you know, it's just very bad for Jamaica. It's not like, you know, the U.S. where people can just evacuate hundreds of miles inland. It doesn't work like that in Jamaica. I mean, sure, you know, west to east is about 120 miles But north to south is only about 40 miles, as I zoomed in too far there, but you get the idea as we're looking and as we're tracking things. So again, just trying to give you guys the very latest. It's a fairly small hurricane, but to make it small in a geographic size here as well. So not a good thing for those poor folks down there. Gonna be awful. You know, just so you gotta feel bad for them there. You know, those people there, you know, their lives are gonna be upended forever from this. Just an awful tragedy headed their way, no doubt. You know, it's just, you know, this is gonna be awful. It's gonna be absolutely awful there in Jamaica. This is gonna be a life-changing event. You gotta keep them in your thoughts and prayers down there as we go ahead and get back toward our, you know, state here in Florida, as we continue to give you the latest here right now. We continue to give you the very latest here. Trying to keep you up to date. There's a lot, you know, information streaming in, people watching on the different platforms here, but you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, and the fact that, you know, lives are gonna be changed forever. I mean, we have problems in Florida right now with the flash flood emergency in Lake County. This is about, you know, it's about keeping people safe. No matter how you're getting the information, whether it's from me or another meteorologist, you know, you just need to be keeping yourself safe. Your local area actually not going to have it. Doesn't seem. I mean, our models, you know, like I said, for the local, you know, Sunshine State stuff, not local covered area stuff, they have not been doing well today at all. But as we're looking at things, it's just about staying safe here and getting information somehow, some way, as we go ahead and look at things here again. Again, I appreciate everybody tuning in. I know on YouTube we have folks like Thomas and Top Cat and Watson. I appreciate you guys tuning in. As again, we give you the latest here, and we have that flash flood emergency in Lake County, Florida. There, just trying to give you the latest updates. Okay, we're just checking some different information. The weather story's really, you know, taking off down there toward the south about what's happening down there. You know, just making national headlines now in Central Florida with this flash flood emergency. We go ahead and the Brevard flooding, honestly, still kind of in play. They've been having a lot of flooding lately, but not like this. Let me see if I can pull some traffic cameras up further east. Bear with me. Oh yeah, this really tells the story there. Wow, around Titusville. Cars do not need to go through this. I mean, it makes for a, you know, good you know, video, but it's not a good thing for humanity. People should not be driving through this water. Right before I took this camera here around in the Brevard County area, somebody drove through this and it did not look fun. You know, in terms of the camera work, if you have more people driving through it, you see the waves coming up, and you don't want to see that, though, even though, again, it does make for, you know, the cameras, just a dramatic view. It's not good for people. You know, this can cause, you know, especially lower line type of vehicles there, not, you know, bigger vehicles to kind of stall out here in these type of waters. Again, this is State Road 406 at US 1 there in Brevard County, as we're looking at the flash flood. This is a considerable warning, not a catastrophic. There you go. They're moving a little slower through it, I think, than the last one did, but it's still not great to be driving through that here in toward Brevard County right now with this. You see the waves. You gotta wonder, I mean, if it's not here, some of this water could be getting into businesses there in towards Central Florida right now as we look and as we track things here. Again, this is in Brevard County. Considerable flash flooding. It looks like a CVS pharmacy side. It looks like a car. Oh, and you see this car. The truck's making it through, but it looks like a car back there in the distance with their flashers. They might have got stranded in this water there if you look real closely. As we're looking here, and you can see right in there, if you can see my cursor, right in there. I know it's hard to make out my cursor, but they see that vehicle, and you see cop lights coming through here now. Again, this is in Brevard County there, and looks like just a mess here with this flooding there in Brevard County, the Space Coast here, considerable flash flooding down that way. Some dramatic live images on this Florida 511 perspective here. Right now, again, it's so important here as we put up the flash flood precautions. You know, remember to move to higher ground, turn around, don't drown, as the 6 inches of flowing water could knock you down here. Again, this is not good stuff, obviously, that we're seeing right now there in Brevard County. Let me go ahead and to jump back on over to some more information here on some other maps. Let me go ahead and keep giving you the latest here. Just a little longer. That's the Brevard County there. That is that camera we were looking at in the Titusville area. They've been getting it pretty bad there. As I go ahead and look, let me see where else I want to go with this. Okay, we have that radar up. Let me go downstate. We're going to go downstate with some cameras, but as I do that, you see all this flooding around, you know, concern, I'm sure, around Pompano Beach. I'm going to try to get a camera down there as we can, but I also want to get a loop here of some of this flooding in Central Florida. I'm going to loop that around another source here in a moment, just showing you how slow things are moving here. And let me just check here some notifications. Okay, just checking to make sure. I appreciate everybody tuning in here and watching. Just checking to see if we have any new alert information. But it's all about keeping folks safe here. Okay, so I have that radar view up. Let's see the loop, though, of Central Florida. And all this precip here, and how slow it's going. I mean, you see all these areas here of rain that's been staying in these green boxes, or it's starting to head more toward Orlando. It's not going to take near as much rain to cause big flooding problems in Orlando here. If this starts to kind of, you know, stall out over them some, they'll start getting some flash flood warnings eventually then. You know, like I said, it hadn't really been bad there, but it could, you know, start to be an issue that is based on this way this is looping here. And you can kind of watch it in motion as we're looking. By the way, 7 degrees up here in our area, and I'll put the temperatures down here on. I mean, even a little bit warmer down there in Central Florida. As you just see everything, that green box in, you know, Lake County area. There's different ones. You know, the more recent one, the flash flood emergency, catastrophic flooding threat. And I don't like how that's, you know, it might not be as much, but it won't even take 18. It might only take like 5 inches of rain in Orlando to really be problematic if it falls over just a little bit, because it's so more urban down there. As we're looking at, we just got a new flash flood warning now way off toward the west. Let me go ahead and jump on over here. This is in Baldwin County, Alabama. Now, there's also a little bit of hook on that storm. This is a flash flood warning for Baldwin County, including the Fairhope area. As we look here, this is south of Mobile a little. There's some rotation with that. Yeah, maybe got to get a tornado warning with that. Let me see though, because sometimes this can overdo it. We have so many different fronts here. Meteorological, you know, I don't mean fronts, the meteorological term. I just mean weather stories. But I mean, there's a front though involved in this. But you see here the rotation, not as tight when you actually look at it on SRV, storm relative velocity. Sometimes the other mode can overdo it. Let's pull up some traffic cameras downstate though. So we wanted to look down there. We wanted to get down there toward areas there around Broward County. So we want to look around Pompano Beach. I'm going to see if I can pull some flooding images up there now. As we're looking and as we're tracking things. See if we can pull some images of some flooding up in that area. I mean, you hope there's not images. Some of them are not live, so that may, you know, limit us here. These are just, you know, still images, but I can get them a little west, but it may not be as bad over there. Potentially. I know we're showing you Alabama on here right now because there's just so much happening. We'll show you some poor weather conditions, at least downstate here. Let me pull up this, you know, some of these areas, you know, we have the views and then we have the more low-lying areas here, which, you know, we can't, you know, there's not maybe cameras there to show, but it's not as popular. But then people in that lot less street lights and lower down, that's where you really have your problems. We kind of had that on the one out there in parts of Brevard there to an extent. But also, we just got a new flash flood warning in Lake and Orange. I know we had tornado around Lake Charles, Louisiana last night. That was a big storyline of the night. They were watching meteorologically. You know, that pattern, that accident trying to advance. But as we have, you know, the boundary there, and you get a lot going on. But this is a view, it's more, you know, see some car flashing going on here with the lights. But, you know, these conditions aren't ideal. Let me go ahead and see what we have, though, in terms of this. I want to check something else here. Then we need to go back up to the new flash flood warning. I mean, you know, just a lot happening here. Complicated pattern. And I know I haven't got a question about it, but, you know, people might be starting to wonder. I mean, we had the one tornado warning. You have a powerful hurricane to the south, and people probably wondering, well, is this going to be anything like the Milton tornado threat last year in South Florida? No, that was a very rare setup, but we could still get some tornado warnings here and there in some spots. Okay, there's some rotation here. Speaking of tornado warnings, northeast of Ocoee. A lot of this is because of the heavy rain, but we got a new flash flood warning now for parts of Orange and Lake. This is a base warning right now, but it may get upgraded as things escalate. You know, some areas could end up with 9 inches here within this area now around Apopka. Some areas, you know, 2 or 3, but Zellwood's been getting a lot of rain. The community of Tangerine, but now Apopka could end up with 9 inches of rain there. And this could start to get into Orlando. I don't know if they'll get 9 inches. Even if they get 6 inches of rain there, and they may not. This could just break up. The models are not handling this. It's really hard to figure this out. But let's just say they get 6 inches. That would still be a big problem in downtown Orlando if they happen to get 6 inches. I know, you know, as bad as it is in some of these areas, that we're lucky if Orlando downtown got 18 inches. We're talking about, you know, just a generational storyline. I mean, it's still, this is flooding that you don't see, you know, once. I mean, in theory, this is a reoccurrence intervals with some of this rain. You know, we're talking about a 1 in a 100 year, 1 in a 200 year. I'm not even looking at it, but I'm just guessing here, maybe once in a 500 year type flood situation for some of these areas. I know we've had hurricanes, so it's not about, it's a little confusing because you can actually have those a few years apart, but we have all this, you know, meteorological acts in here with this precip, you know, this stuff just amplified here, and this is coming into Orlando here. As we look and as we track, you see some rotation this week, but there's some winds, 40, 50 miles an hour possible, moving in the north side of Orlando over the next little bit. As this has gotten, you know, again, kind of out of hand here with the flooding, though. That's not, you know, not the tornado threat. It hadn't gotten out of hand. We had the one warning for Brevard. We have this stuff here over a foot of rain, over a foot up in here in Lake County. That's starting to spread now some, though it is hopefully moving a little quicker, I want to say. I mean, you know, let's just see how some of this has gotten here the last little bit. Yeah, some of this in an hour, 2 or 3. I mean, it's possible Orlando only ends up with 2 or 3 inches, but that's still a good bit if it's over an hour or so. You know, we'll see, because it looks like it's kind of shrinking as it's moving here some. Becoming a little bit more, you know, progressive here in the overall movement, but it's still headed right into Orlando there. Again, let me go ahead and look here at what's off to the west, because some of this is going to try to make its way into our western counties here. We'll have to watch some of the stuff over the Gulf here, because again, the model that may handle the east well, so they might not handle this well, but some of this stuff could become Mr. More, you know, in theory, you know, threat that's tornadoes that's more able to potentially be realized based on the parameters here. As we're looking, you know, Pensacola, Fort Walton Beach, Panama City, right along the coast, maybe more than anything, with the instability potential. Gulf, Franklin, you know, Franklin's our area, McCullough, Liberty, maybe. If we had something in our area in terms of tornadoes, you'd think that'd be the most likely spot for that here. And I'll show that to you on our other forecasts, the SPC, here in a second. Here you go, your SPC tornado risk. You know, it does include these areas here along the coast for the overnight hours. A possible tornado, not out of the question, or Apalachicola even approaching sunrise here in the morning, potentially. So Again, the models haven't been handling things well at all in Central Florida, so I don't know if it's going to handle things, the guidance well for out there, but just remember when there's a tornado warning, seek shelter inside a sturdy building. Get as many walls between you and the outside as possible and protect yourself from flying debris by putting on a bicycle helmet, football helmet, baseball helmet, and make sure if you're just getting out of bed, make sure your shoes are on, so if there's a tornado, in the aftermath of that, you don't cut your feet up there. Have just shoes on. I know it's, important. Try not to be in mobile homes here either. If you can help it in these type of instances, as we go ahead and give you guys the very latest here. We give you guys the very latest. Again, it's 11:05 right now. Of course, there's so many weather stories going on. Rain slacking off in Boca Raton, still pretty heavy in Pompano Beach, though. Some of this we may start getting. Let me check this hourly. Yeah, we'll probably start getting more. We'll get another flash flood warning here north of Fort Lauderdale around Oakland Park. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a flash flood warning down in that direction. I know we had all that flooding in Fort Lauderdale going back a couple years ago. And they had that, isolated like this kind of, not instant. We didn't have a tropical system way to the south, but, it was April, I think it was. But you had a situation here, I think it was April 23. I know that years of time kind of, sometimes gets away from you a little bit here, but, we had that isolated flooding in Fort Lauderdale. It was April 23, April 12, 23. All that terrible flooding down there confined to that zone, that water hose. And we kind of had a similar, different in some ways, but similar idea with the problems here, not really that well forecasted. So that is what this reminds me of a little bit here. But they're starting to get it down. They're not as bad, not a warning yet. 12-hour rainfall, and so it's less than 12 hours. You see Boca Raton now, my estimator's on 10.6 inches for them. But, West Palm Beach, 2 inches. So, in Miami, you're wondering what's going on in Miami. Maybe a trace pretty much. They had a little rain last night during a football game there, Miami Hurricanes football game. Looking at that against Stanford. But then you have Rockledge here. This is showing 7-8. It could be 7 or 8 inches. It could be underdoing at Summit, some Port St. John at 10 inches. Titusville here at 12, 13 inches of rain. We had there's vehicles trying to go through that, but maybe even some stalled out. Eustis here, we're seeing 14, but again, the Weather Service said maybe over 18 inches of rain has fallen in some of Lake County here. But in our area, just north of that by a few miles, we're talking about only an inch or two. And you see Palm Coast area, maybe, a half inch there down toward Flagler Beach. Let's zoom in here. You see Flagler Beach, they're about an inch for them. Some of these areas in northern Putnam picking up about 3 or 4, but more rural there. In St. John's, we have seen about 5 to 6, but those have been flood advisory, not flash flood warning prompting. So we have had 5 or 6 in a few spots in St. John's, but this area is able to handle it enough, so we haven't had to have a flash flood warning issued. It fell over enough time, and that rain is kind of broken up here to, the extent in terms of not having to, redge all over the place enough where it's more just helpful when you have drought versus, like threatening with just waves of, very heavy rain coming in. So, again, there's a lot going on. I think we pretty much, this is not in our area here with anything. We pretty much, I think, said about all we can say for now. Of course, it's, become a bigger storyline in just the local area here, in that. What I mean by that is, it's not something where it's just a local story for these folks now. Of course, the Jamaica storyline, that's going to be an international tragedy. But for these folks here, Central Florida stuff generally, localized like this does not become a storyline nationally, but it has now, with the emergency being issued there by the Weather Service in Melbourne. Had all that flood even around Rockledge there. Let me see if we've got any new updates for the last few minutes. Let me see if there's any questions, comments from any of the viewers. Again, I appreciate everybody tuning in and trusting me on all the different platforms here. On YouTube, when you're watching live, you can always back up on that with the DVR functionality. So that's helpful if you're kind of, maybe missed something I said and I don't circle back to it too quick. You can watch over there. Let me go ahead. I see if we have any updates on any of these warnings before I go here. Okay, Baldwin County, Alabama. That was just a little while ago. Let me move this out so we can. There's just all over the place here, folks. So these flash flood warnings, there's 7 of them. 6 of them in Florida, 1 just outside of Florida for Baldwin County, Alabama. Lake and Orange, as the radar indicated, the lake window for used to some doors in emergency. That's what we really came on. Catastrophic flooding there. Life threatening toward Broward County. Palm Beach County life threatening. Brevard life threatening. Another one in Brevard life threatening. So again, a lot of flash flooding. You don't see this red everywhere. Now you have to zoom in. It's localized spots of danger. I mean, that's still bad there. You know, around Cape Canaveral even. I mean, look at Cape Canaveral right on the edge of some of the heaviest, 5-6 inches according to this. But just west about a foot. Some of that's water, but still, as you look here, I mean, it's over water, but still, you kind of get the idea here. There's just, you know, we have this area with the emergency in Lake County there, over a foot, foot and a half of rain. Some areas probably going to end up approaching 2 feet. And you have out here, we have eventually maybe a tornado threat emerging. You know, we had that threat this morning out there in Louisiana, Mississippi, and a little bit southern Alabama, you know, Florida Panhandle, western part. Though we watch the other storyline here, which is Melissa. You know, again, we have low pressure, high pressure, we have fronts, we have other little lows here. It's a lot going on. I mean, this is not directly associated with Melissa, but, you know, we have a pattern with some contrast going on with the overall winds, and there's just a lot happening here, folks, in the overall meteorological world here and the meteorology pattern. So I think that's going to do it for now for the coverage. We'll break back in if we need to for local, obviously. You know, if it warrants, we'll always just post if we don't think it's enough to jump in for. But national, international, if warranted here. There's just a lot happening, a lot going on here, folks. You know, just a big, big deal here as we look and as we track things. As we give you guys the very latest, I'll leave you with this viewpoint here. Just an awful situation for Jamaica here, folks. Awful, awful, awful for them. Looking at some things right now. Getting some wind there, not far off a tropical force at Kingston. But it's just going to get worse and worse. And this is going to be not something that moves through quick. It's not a quick mover. We're talking about maybe not a landfall to early Tuesday, the Cat 5. And before then, it's bringing the moisture surge, getting worse. And, you know, it's going to stay over them. I mean, it may accelerate eventually, which could help some. You know, but it's just going to be over them for a while because we start to see a gap in the timeline a little. In that we start to see the forward movement some, which could help. Though, I mean, you know, we'll have to watch in Cuba. Guantanamo Bay is going to have some issues as well. But, you know, the forward movement can help limit the rain totals a little. Let me see what they said real quick here, and they're discussing and information with these rain totals. They might have adjusted these some. Let me see what they said here. The Hurricane Center in Miami, they always send this information out. Okay, so the rain totals here, as I look here, under the hurricane winds only extend 30 miles from the center, so not everybody's going to be just decimated by the winds, but a lot of people will be by the rain or the surge. Yeah, they're still going up 40 inches there, Jamaica, maybe even some of southern Hispaniola, but, you know, more Jamaica here it would seem, especially with this kind of adjusting a little west here on us. So, again, some areas, even if it makes example for the west, of that moisture can just, you know, train on in. This is a monster storm, just total devastation anticipated there in Jamaica. A devastating situation for those folks. It's awful, 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 awful. I know, we did just get a mesoscale discussing, and there's just a lot happening here about this area for a brief tornado being possible with potential intensification, according to Storm Prediction Center, Norman, of a transient supercell tracking along a quasi-stationary front. Limited space will extend in a marginal nature that will preclude a watch issuance, but multiple transient circulations have occurred over the past 2 to 3 hours with a slow-moving but persistent updraft that has evolved from near Dauphin Island across a part of Mobile Bay into Baldwin County, Alabama. But each circulation attempt is eventually broadened and diminished with a weakness there in the 1 to 3 kilometer portions of Hodograph, Purdy, Mobile, VWP, and poor tropospheric lap rates. I know we get technical and they get technical with this, but sampled in the available 0Z RAOBs there. But nevertheless, this updraft may track eastward along the quasi-stationary front that extends over land across Pensacola to Santa Rosa Island, and potential for brief tornado genesis may persist at about 1 a.m. Central Time along this corridor. So that's the storyline there. As we pull radar in for a second on that, as we keep on watching, we keep on tracking, we look at the winds there. I want to pull the steps in, and then we'll go ahead and jump back down here to is an awful, awful hurricane headed on in there toward Jamaica. Guantanamo Bay is going to have problems too, in north part to Cuba. But you see Jamaica there. There you go. Just terrible, folks. It's terrible stuff. A lot of big weather problems here in some spots. I mean, Jamaica's going to be all over the place. You know, Florida is really hit and miss where we have some really bad stuff and you don't have any rain hardly. I mean, we've only in Bradford here east of Stark about 0.17 inches here for today. So not a lot, but we're wrapping it up. Stay tuned. Everybody will be back as needed. Stay safe. Thoughts and prayers with Jamaica. Thoughts and prayers, you know, with the flash flood warnings in Florida. We could even have some warnings of our own here in our western counties, I would think, you know, in terms of maybe a road tornado warning, Apalachicola, early morning possibly there, and we're going to be more thunderstorm warning, something like that, and we'll see if we get some more of that moisture from Central Florida to go further north. We'll have to watch Orlando for some flooding concern as well, ultimately, so as that starts to move on in, but hopefully there'll be more movement there. A lot, you know, less maybe of stolen with that, but we'll see. We'll keep you advised. For now, stay safe. Stay tuned. We'll be back again, you know, when things warrant.